Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. This one will probably not be 10 minutes to be fair. And the topic of this not 10-minute moan is this shock, surprise. John Swinney is a new leader of the SNP. It has now been confirmed. If you want to support the podcast, you can become a member on YouTube, or you can subscribe, or just give us a thumbs up when you see one of my videos. That would be a fantastic help. So, we've been hit now with the news this afternoon that John Swinney is the new leader of the SNP after an uncontested leadership campaign, which did see two possible other candidates, one being Kate Forbes and the other being Graham McCormick, one of the SNP's activists. Kate Forbes had a chat with John Swinney and then pulled out the race and supported John Swinney. Graham McCormack, surprisingly, had a word with John Swinney and pulled out the race and now supports John Swinney. Okay, so this is North Korean style leadership, but to be fair, is the result that the SNP needed, because neither of the other two candidates would have been able to be First Minister, because Kate Forbes would not have attracted the support of the Greens, which is needed if you're going to be the First Minister of Scotland, obviously. And Mr McCormick is not a SNP MSP, so he'd have been unable to have stood for the position of First Minister, which is normally what the SNP require. And I believe, although I've not had it confirmed anywhere, I believe the SNP changed the rules that the leader had to be in Holyrood, which ruled out Stephen Flynn from being possibly the SNP leader. We have previously had an SNP leader and an SNP First Minister being a different person, but I think someone suggested a couple of days ago that they have binned that notion. So what next? Well, John Swinney will now need to present himself as the SNP's candidate to become First Minister. And now, because we are in a minority government situation with the SNP, that isn't the same position as when Humza was there, that when he became the First Minister, he was an automatic shoo-in. So we all need to go through this process, but let's not be shocked and surprised when the Greens back John Swinney as First Minister, plus his party. He gets 70 votes. I think they cut off 64, and he becomes a new First Minister of Scotland probably later on this week. Now, what I didn't find surprising was almost immediately as his leadership was confirmed, the press started putting out things by the Greens, and they're demanding that he doesn't put any of the policies that were agreed on when they were in power due to the BHA agreement, not to put any of them in the bin. And one of the things they seem quite keen on him not to put in the bin is the, those therapies that try and help people not be trans. They're going to ban them, and you'll be really, really angry if there's any move to alter that situation. Now, I find that pretty bizarre, because the Green Party were formed and built to look after environmental issues. Somewhere along the road, the transgender issues, gay rights, etc., are now on a par with any problems I've got with the climate and environment, which I just find incredible. The lunatics have certainly taken over the asylum. So that's what will probably happen. What we'll have is nothing any different. Actually, the Greens are probably in a better position now when you consider, because previously, if they wanted anything to be accepted by government, due to the Butte House agreement, they would sit in cabinet meetings and try and persuade the SNP to accept them. Now, all they need to do is tell them what they want, and if they don't adhere to it, they could simply call a vote of no confidence in either the First Minister or the entire government, and topple a government as soon as anything doesn't go their way. It's a frightening thought, isn't it? So the Greens, although they're no longer in government, potentially, well, not potentially, it's factually have more power now than they had 2 weeks ago, because anything they disagree with, just call for a vote of no confidence. pretty sure the rest of the Parliament would agree with him and potentially bring on an election. So, however long this government's got left, and we could have up to 2 years until we have an election. But unless there's one called earlier or a vote of no confidence is carried on the government, which would in turn bring forward an election day, the Greens will be dictating whatever they want, whenever they want. And that is bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. Slater and Harvey will have more power when you consider it today, tomorrow, whenever the First Minister gets selected, than they had when they were in government. That's an actual scary thought. But they'll hold a gun to the SNP's head. If they're daft enough to give in to the threats, then the Greens will decide what does and doesn't go through Parliament. Should they disagree with anything, and should the SNP be brave enough, which I doubt they will, to go against any of the Greens' demands while they remain in government, you'll know fine well that they could be facing an election, a snap election at any time. So I think it's probable that they will do what they seem to have done with the two candidates that were going to stand against Swinney, and that's just do deals with them constantly. I wonder how long, likes of Kate Forbes, what's his name again? That's terrible. His name's just flew right out of my head. His mum was the granny of the SNP. What's his name again? That's shocking. Fergus Ewan. Yeah, senility went and caught up with me now. It'll be interesting what will happen when the SNP start bowing to the Greens, how they react, because they've already shown their displeasure for that going forward, and I don't believe they'll be alone in the SNP parliamentary group. But I wonder if any of them would have the gonads to stand up against any of the Green-backed suggestions that are going to go through Parliament pretty damn quick. It'll be an interesting time. I still think the SNP will do whatever the SNP need to do in a sort of SNP way to keep power until the election's due in a couple of years. However, it is possible that if they don't keep the Greens and those inside their own party happy, we could, although it's possible, it's probably not going to happen, we could have an early election. So good luck to John Swinney being the key holder to this absolute lunatic asylum now, and quite what he does in the next 2 years will be frightening to watch. The only way he's probably guaranteed to remain in power and keep his SNP in power is actually do nothing for fear of upsetting either the Greens or the more central leaning politicians in Holyrood who are sitting on the SNP benches. So interesting times ahead. We're just going to have a nightmare between now and having an election. My personal opinion would be just let democracy play out and have an election. But the SNP will never do that. So they've denied two people a democratic campaign for leadership, and they've denied the Scots again for the second time the democratic right to try and select the First Minister. But apparently that only counts when it's the Tories that do it at Westminster, eh? Silly me. So, unless you're John Swinney, whoever he ends up in his cult cabinet, and any of the dwindling numbers of cult supporters that the SNP still have, everybody else, have a great day. Cheery bye now.